Greetings YouTube, welcome back to the Meta channel. I am Marcus, bringing you another video for Cardfight Vanguard Overdress. In this video, I will be going through the 4 possible builds for Bruce. As you already know, and if you watch my channel closely, you will know that I'm a Bruce main, which means I use Bruce a lot, be it competitively as well as casual, although I still do play other Dark States deck. But Bruce is my main go-to deck. So I do have a extensive knowledge on how to pilot Bruce as well as some of the combos that you guys previously saw in this channel. So in this video, I will be going through all 4 Bruce deck builds that you can make at this point. I mean, at least until DBT06 is out. And I will basically give them a rating on how I think, on how well they do in certain aspect of the deck, be it their consistency, their power, as well as their resource recovery, all those stuff, so that you have a good idea on what Bruce deck that you want to play. And of course, if this video does give you a good idea on what build do you want to build for Bruce, do leave a like as well as subscribe. I know I'm a YouTuber, I'm basically obliged to promote my channel in each and every other video. But yeah, if this video does helps you out, or maybe helps your friend out who wants to actually play Bruce, do give this video a like as well as share it to more friends. With out of the way, let's get this video started. So for the rating that I will be giving each of these builds is actually based on all these 6 criteria. The first one being power, which will be rating the overall power output. So this is basically a very straightforward rating. It basically just gauge on how high the power of each attack will be. The second one being aggression means that how well does this deck actually rush the opponent while not actually minusing yourself too much. And of course, the cost. The cost here is basically how fast you use your resources. For example, your Counterblast as well as Soul Blast. For consistency, this is basically how well does the deck actually gets you your key pieces. For recovery here is basically how fast can you regain your resources. How fast can Bruce recover from, you know, after one turn of Final Rush. And lastly, of course, is bricking. Now, bricking here not necessarily means that you can't ride into grade 4 or basically draw into your pieces. Bricking here actually means that how much key pieces do you need in order for you to have like a really good combo turn. So these are the criteria that I will be rating for each build. So feel free to come back to this point of the video if you don't understand why I put certain builds at certain ratings. So yeah, do keep that in mind. So for the first build, this is probably my most favorite build and most consistent out of the 4 builds, the Unrivaled Meagan build. This is basically my VMC build, where I actually have a video regarding this build on the channel. You can find it. You just type VMC in my channel, you should be able to see this build. So the rating for this build is basically 4-star for power. This build does gain a significant amount of power, being 41k on the first attack, 40k on Meagan if you do have the doggo, and give Meagan the power with the additional Hell Blast power boost as well. And of course, Meagan is just gonna keep increasing in power the more times she attacks her. At the minimum, Meagan will be attacking for at least 50k if you do boost her with the doggo, that is. So it's only at 4-star. It's not going to be like the most high powered build as compared to like the OTK build, because as we all know, OTK build can go really crazy with the power, which is why this build is at 4. It's actually quite decent enough to basically discourage your opponent from not guarding. Without any damage trigger, I don't think your opponent will want to guard. This deck does not really want to rush a lot because most of your stuff are locked behind the Final Rush. So I mean, you could still rush depending on who you're playing against, but then again, you will be sacrificing one piece of your key pieces. For the cost wise, this deck can basically use at least 2 Counterblasts per turn after your Final Rush turn, because you know, Unrivaled Bruce will definitely cost 1 Counterblast, Hell Blast will cost 1 Counterblast, and the only other card that basically uses Counterblast is Lily. And Lily is actually quite optional in this build. You can choose not to use the Order or Lily, depends on what your hand looks like, and you will still have a very decent Final Rush turn because most of your power is free. It's actually really disgusting how much power this build can get, while at the same time being at the lowest cost possible. And for consistency, yeah, I put this at full because so far I've tested a lot in this build. The consistency in you getting your full combo every single turn after your final rush is like super disgusting, because you do get the draw, like quite a lot, and with the draw trigger, I think it's super nice. Keep in mind here is that any key pieces in the soul could be called out by Lily. So if you do have one key pieces in the soul, you can always just call Lily and use his skill to call out that key piece, which is super nice, and this will put you at 3 counter blasts for the whole combo turn if you do decided to use the order afterwards. But yeah, this deck draws a lot too, due thanks to Marjorie as well as, you know, some other key pieces. I mean, Unrivaled is gonna give you like 4 cards in total without you actually discarding anything. So even if your opponent decides to, you know, board nuke your front row, it's actually not too bad because, you know, you draw a lot and you still can call stuff out from the soul thanks to Lily. For recovery, yeah, recovery, there's nothing much to say here because we have a lot of stuff that basically gives you back the soul. Marjorie, Lily, Wade, as well as the Doggle. Well, the crit here as well, but you don't really use the crit to soul charge unless you're going for a final turn push. But yeah, this deck does not really use a lot of counter blast, which means that the recovery is very nice. Although you will eventually still run out of counter blast, because even at a minimum of 2 counter blast usage per turn, you, after like maybe 2 turns of final rush, if you somehow still did not kill your opponent, you are gonna left with 1 counter blast, which might be a little bit of an issue because you don't have counter charge in this build. And lastly, of course, is the bricking. And since the consistency is at full star, the bricking is like very minimal because you don't really brick a lot. Well, you do, it's just not a lot. You can like not draw into your grade 4, and that basically severely limits to how well you perform in your final rush turn. So you hardly brick, but you still will brick. For the next build is everyone's favorite Persona Ride Julian build. Since this is a Persona Ride, you don't run the Unrivaled Bruce anymore. So you basically focus on Persona Riding and you just go ham in your opponent. So the power here is quite similar to the grade 4 Meagan build, because, you know, I would argue this build has more power than the Meagan build, but then again, it's more or less the same because you have stuff that basically only gains like 5k or 10k, which Unrivaled Meagan build actually does gain the same amount or more thanks to Meagan. So it's more or less the same, the power output, so it's at 4 star, but the aggression here is much more better than Unrivaled Meagan build thanks to Julian being able to rush your opponent at the 3rd turn. Having access to 4 attacks on the 3rd turn thanks to the Dradual grade 1 is actually super nice and very disgusting. Imagine having 2 of the Dradual grade 1 on one of your columns. That's a 26k, and if you are at 4 damage with Julian, you're able to recall them back for another 26k column, which is disgusting. It's just disgusting. And it goes to soul afterwards. Next, of course, is the cost. The cost part is going to cost you quite a bit because of the counter blast. Soul, I don't think it's going to be an issue, but the counter blast is, because in order for you to have like a 6 to 7 to 8 attacks, I mean, you can go up to 10, but that's very not realistic. You have to pay at least 2 counter blasts, 1 from Julian, 1 from Protobulb, which will basically tends to make you use up a lot of counter blasts in 1 turn. While yes, you do hit like really hard on your Persona Ride turn, it's still really subjected to your key pieces, depends on what you draw to your hand as well as what's in your soul, and if you did Persona Ride, that is. So yeah, after 1 turn, I think the subsequent turn will be slightly less effective due to the heavy counter blast that you'll be using. So it's really not that great in terms of the cost as well. So for consistency, it's actually okay. It's not that bad. It's just that you still have to draw into your key pieces unless you got really lucky with the soul charge for Julian as well as Leonard. But then again, anything with RNG just hurts the consistency of the deck. But hey, it's not that bad after a lot of testing. For the recovery part, due to this deck not having access to counter charge, yeah, it's not very recoverable, because once you use that counter blast, if you don't heal it away, you basically could not have access to your full combo for a second final rush. So it's really not great. For bricking, this deck still depends on whether or not you have all your key pieces. Dradual grade 1, Julian, as well as Protobulb. The rest is still kind of optional, but with every pieces that you have, it actually makes your final rush turn or your 3rd turn even even more scarier. This build is everyone's favorite, although I'm still very skeptical of this build. I know it functions really well. It's just that I tend to prefer the Great Form a little bit more than this build, because the only problem I have with this deck is that the center line, meaning the Vanguard attack, feels really weak. Maybe it's just my own problem. So next up, this is my own build for the Bruce deck, the Unrivaled Julian build. Unlike the Personal Right Julian build, this one actually utilizes the Great 4, meaning that you will have your Vanguard pressure on top of having the third turn combo. So this build basically is my own recipe. I don't see anyone else running this build. It's actually really good. Now for the power wise, it's very decent, comparable to the other two builds, although not really as high as Meagan, since you will be using a lot of counterblast and you do need a little bit of setup for you to have access to that power. Yeah, it's actually quite nice power boost. For the aggression, similar to the Personal Right Julian build, you actually do have access to the third turn combo, although I didn't put the Grade 1 Draw here. You can actually take out some copies of the Doggo for the Draw Grade 1, which will basically let you have access to the third turn attack combo, which is super nice. For consistency, yeah, even I put this at 4. After some testing, I actually find it a little bit not that great in terms of, you know, you need to have specific pieces in the soul for this deck to have like a very disgusting turn. For example, DeAndre, the Grade 2, the new Grade 2 that gains a power boost when he's appeared from the soul. Yeah, that card needs to be in the soul for you to basically do anything with this build. If he is in the soul and you are at 4 damage, together with Regina, that thing is gonna hit for 40k. Which is super disgusting. Even without the Regina, DeAndre is hitting for 30k, which is super disgusting. This whole deck, the consistency is actually not too bad, although one other tech choices that you can make is basically replace the Richard, the Grade 2 in the right line with DeAndre, which lets you have DeAndre in the soul by the time you reach your final rush turn, which is actually not a bad idea, and you can just place that one copy to Regina, which increase your consistency in getting all your combo pieces. For the cost, it actually costs quite a bit because, you know, you need at least 3 counterblast for your full combo turn, because Julian 1 counterblast, Protobub 1 counterblast, as well as Unrivaled Bruce will have 1 counterblast as well. You could argue that Regina will give you a 4th counterblast, but as you already noticed, I am running the new order card, which is a Helheim Fervent Rage, which gives you a counter charge as well as draw 2 cards, which is why I put the consistency at 4, because you are able to draw your pieces while at the same time giving you counter charge, which is very nice. You will still run out of counterblast, mind you, but the counter charge order actually makes a difference in this build. So for recovery, the only weakness to this deck is, of course, the recovery. It's not going to be as fast as Unrivaled Meagan build, because Unrivaled Meagan doesn't really use a lot of counterblast as compared to this build. The only limiting factor to this build is basically the soul, because the only thing that basically soul charge in this deck is basically the Doggo as well as Julian. I mean, yeah, Regina does give you 1 extra soul as well, but hey, Gina needs to pay that 1 counterblast in order to give you that 1 soul, which most of the time isn't that really great. For bricking, yeah, this deck will still brick far more than Unrivaled Meagan build because of the key pieces that you have in order to be really effective. But based on the changes that I mentioned previously, I think this deck will basically have lesser chance to brick. So yeah, this build I didn't actually cover in the channel, but if you are interested in this build, let me know down in the comment section, and I possibly will make a build and going in depth with this build. So yeah, that's basically it. For the last build is the OTK. I don't have a deck list because this build is like everywhere and is like my least favorite build out of the 4 builds. So this is the infamous OTK build where you soul charge a lot and pump up the Brainwash Swirler to like very big numbers and then just kill your opponent that turn. Power max. This deck has the most power out of the 4 builds, and yeah, it's actually insane like to how much the numbers can go. I mean, I once saw like Brainwash hitting for 70k, I think, with the Quan Lu God Restrict. So this deck is disgusting. Aggression, this deck does not really want to rush the opponent because he needs the counterblast. The more counterblast he has, the higher the chance of him OTKing you. So do as you will with that knowledge. For the cost is max because you just want to use like every single counterblast that you have at that moment just to kill your opponent, because you're not trying to play the long game with this deck. You deck out like immediately after your OTK turn, provided all of your key pieces are present during your final rush turn. This build, I think, is the most volatile build out of the 4. Unfortunately, the consistency isn't that great. You know, with one less key pieces during your final rush turn, the less threatening that whole turn is going to be. Although even with the lesser amount of key pieces in your hand, the only cards that you basically need is Pandemonium, Brainwash Sweller, Unrivaled Bruce, as well as Brian. That's it. To have like a very disgusting OTK turn. Recovery is at 0. You have no way to recover, be it a counterblast. I mean, the soul, you definitely have a lot of soul, just not that many counterblasts. You don't really have a lot of countercharge option, which is why the recovery is at 0. So this whole build wants you to kill your opponent at the 4th turn. If you don't kill your opponent at the 4th turn, it's most likely you're gonna deck out really fast. And yeah, the breaking. I mean, this deck will break. Like, it will break. But not to the point where it's unplayable. You just will break, that's all. And that is all for this video. Do let me know down in the comment section on which build that you will prefer going to for Bruce. For me personally, of course, you guys know, it's either the Unrivaled Meagan or the Unrivaled Julian. Those two are the builds that I will tend to favor more. I know everyone likes to play the personal right Bruce build, but your center column is not really that pressuring, if I'm being honest. And what's more, the center is just twin drive, while Unrivaled Bruce is triple drive. That is gonna put a significant amount of pressure to your opponent. Do like and subscribe if you like this video, and of course, do ring the bell notification icon so that you don't miss a video I upload. With that being said, I'll see you all on the field.